Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am with Jonathan Oberlander, who is the owner and winemaker of J. Scott Cellars. We are in the very south part of the Willamette Valley in Eugene, Oregon, and we're here in the tasting room. And Jonathan, thank you for joining us, and tell us a little bit about J. Scott Cellars.
Thank you. Well, we are a small urban winery, so we actually don't have any vineyards, which is kind of unique, but it really allows us the freedom to purchase grapes and make a huge variety of wines. And I think currently we have probably at least 25 on release right now. And so it's a fun way to do it.
So where are you sourcing fruit from?
Really all over. I go out to Walla Walla for Cab Sauv and Cab Franc. I get some Albarino and Merlot and sometimes Syrah of Prosser in Eastern Washington. All through the gorge, we get Zin and Cabernet as well, all the way down to the Rogue Valley, which is along the California-Oregon border. And a lot of nice Rhone stuff down there, some great Pinots, and then kind of everywhere in between, the Willamette Valley, the Umpqua.
Wow.
Quite
a diverse selection.
35,000 miles a year.
What's your total case production?
We make about 10,000 cases.
10,000 cases. And I know in front of us right now, we've got a whole smattering. We've got Albarino, we've got Grenache Rosé, we've got Sauvignon Blanc, we've got Chardonnay. What other grapes are you making?
We do Petit Syrah, we do Syrah, we do Grenache, Cab Sauv, we do Mourvedre, we do Petit Verdot, Malbec, Merlot. We've done Gewürztraminer, we do dry Riesling, we do some dessert Rieslings. I mean, you name it. I'm kind of like a kid in a candy store, and I kind of started making my own varietals, and it's somewhere along the line I kind of lost focus, and now I just make everything. So,
and where can we find your wines?
So we currently have distribution in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and the state of Maryland recently. So,
okay. Well, now that we got that out of the way, tell me something. What is your first memory relevant to wine?
My first memory, I want to say it was I kind of grew up in the 70s. And, that was kind of the Bartles and James era. And I remember grown-ups making wine coolers. And I remember kind of emulating that when I went up to college. I don't think I was of age, but, they were kind of easy to drink. And, that's kind of my first memory. And then a few years later, I remember going into Trader Joe's and discovering all these red wines like Hungarian bull's blood for $3.99. And that's when I really started drinking red wine. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And that's when I kind of got my taste for reds.
Oh. And so in all the time that you've been drinking wine now and all the wines you've been exposed to, is there one particular memorable wine that you drank that really sort of put you on a new path or made you look at wine a different way, or kind of that aha moment?
Yeah, and in fact, that's actually why I got into winemaking, because the whole time I was making wine, I was working at breweries and, making craft beers. But I love craft beer, but I've never had a beer, give me that feeling like a great wine does. And I think one of my most memorable bottles was when I was dating my wife. We were in Yosemite at this little lodge called the Wawona. And it was a snowy night, and I was having a 1987 Georges de la Tour from Beaulieu. And it was just sitting outside, and it was just completely silent and just watching it snow. And this wine was just amazing. And I just didn't want to go anywhere. I just wanted so pretty memorable.
And that was it.
That was it.
So have you spent time traveling around the world, tasting different wines, exploring them, or spending more time locally? We
did. So when my wife and I got married, we honeymooned in Europe for about a month. And so we did the Rhine, which was fantastic. We started in England. There was not a lot of stuff going on in England now, but I've actually had some really great sparkling wines coming out of England. We went through Beaune and Burgundy. Really loved the south of France, and we ended up staying there, visiting a number of places. And so that's why when we did our own thing, we said we're doing Rhone stuff because we love that. And then I just keep finding other things, and I just can't help myself. But yeah, Italy, we just took our kids back a couple of years ago, and I was really impressed with the whites out of Italy. I was thinking, they're going to be flabby and it's too warm, and they were just beautiful and racy. And we had fantastic Austrian whites, some Swiss stuff, and I love the world of wine because they're all different depending on where they're grown and who's making them,
Absolutely. So when you look around and in your travels among all the populations, who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality?
I think we drink pretty well in the U.S. I will say that, in France, I cannot tell you how many fantastic $2 bottles of red wine I had, or $12 a bottle, on the Mediterranean in a restaurant, and they're dynamite, so they're making great wines, and I don't know how they can do it at that price because my packaging costs more than that, So I'm dumbfounded, but I think they live well, and the Italians do as well. I mean, they love food and drink, and it's just kind of part of the whole experience.
Absolutely. So if we were to come to your home and go into your cellar, whether that was a little refrigerator or a little nook somewhere or a big cellar, what would we find in there?
A lot of weird stuff. So Portuguese reds from the Douro, Malbecs from Argentina that people have brought me that they don't export. So just fun stuff. I like, and I have some aged wines. I like to buy weird stuff because that's kind of how you learn and you just kind of expand your mind. And so, there's some Pinots and things, but most of my stuff is really unusual things, Gruners and.
Anything in particular drinking really well right now?
We just had the holiday season, so we're just in there digging through the cellar and pulling out a bunch of stuff. And I had some really great Cab Francs that really were like, we do some Cab Franc, and I don't do it every year, but it's a wine that I'm just like, I really need to start doing that more often because it's just, I don't know, it has this bell pepper character. And when I made wine in California, that character was considered a defect, if your cab has that bell pepper. Well, I had an assistant winemaker from Argentina. And if your cab doesn't have that character, it's a defect. And so it's really perspective. And so that's one of the reasons I like to have different things, because it's important to have perspective and, know where you're coming from and where you're going.
Absolutely. So you're working with so many different grapes and making so many different types of wine. Do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
I don't know that there is. I mean, I think that they differ by vintage, year in and year out. I mean, I swing for the fence with every single wine. Sometimes you get a home run and sometimes you don't. But it kind of depends on how the weather is, especially in the Northwest. I find that we're really impacted by the weather, and it's really shows by vintage. And it's kind of fun. One of the reasons I source fruit from all over the place and so many vineyards is that I'm kind of hedging my bets that the weather's not going to be crappy everywhere in the same year. And so you can make a blend and hopefully make a good wine every single year. But some things like the Albarino, it only comes out of Prosser. So it's either all or nothing.
Protecting yourself, covering all bases.
Yeah, because I want to have a great product, all the time,
Absolutely.
It's easier to sell that way.
So at the risk of controversy here, what's your opinion about wine critics and scores?
We do send in stuff. And we've been fortunate to receive a lot of good awards and good scores and some national publications. And I never see a huge bump when that happens. But when I'm out in the public and I'm doing outside events or I'm working with my distributors, they find that information really useful. It's helpful for them because when they approach an account, this was 91 points in Wine Enthusiast, blah, 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 and it helps them sell it. So, and a lot of times people come up and they say, what's good? I say, well, I brought 16 wines for you today. They're all good, but, this one got this score and this one got this score. What do you like to drink? And then I kind of direct them down the path of, are you dry whites? Are you softer reds, big reds? And so from there, I kind of point them in the direction and then give them a little encouragement. Well, this got this. Maybe you should try it. If you get them to try it, that's the key. And once they've tried 2 or 3 wines and they're all good, they're hooked. Then they love you, regardless of whether it had a good score or not.
So let's get down to you as a wine drinker, as a consumer. Red, white, or rosé?
I'm a big white guy, but I also love rosés. Now, a lot of people are fans. They tell me that they really love our red wines, but I find that the white wines in the Pacific Northwest are under a lot of people's radar. This is it's the perfect area for growing whites. We don't have those Indian summers that you have in California, so we don't oxidize a lot of the delicate aromatics, and so they're just fantastic. They have bright acid, beautiful aromatics, and we actually consider ourselves to be white wine specialists. We do a bunch of really lovely white wines. We have a fantastic German Europress. It's brand new. It presses very gently. We use these champagne pressing cycles that don't squeeze, very difficult. I always make really generous press cuts so that I keep the wines pretty and aromatic, and then I treat the pressed wines later, and hopefully we can get them back into the main blend. If we don't, we don't. But the goal is to make fantastic white wines.
Still or sparkling?
I love sparkling. I tried to make it once, and I just completely boogered up the secondary fermentation and didn't do it again. And people are asking me. I do have some Pinot Noir base that I made last year, so it's still something I want to get in to do. And there's some people now that will actually re-inoculate it, get into the bottle, They send you back the bins. We keep them in garage, and then they'll disgorge. And so that's really nice because, if you're bottling under pressure, you need a whole nother bottling line system, and it's more expensive and more challenging. And a lot of times, those wines are aged for 3 years. I mean, there's a lot invested. And so I want one, but we'll see, hopefully.
Big investment. So if someone wants to hold your hand through it, it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I could use a little guidance. And I have a friend here in town, and he has a buddy up at Epitome who has a disgorging unit, and he borrows the disgorging unit for their sparkling wines. And he says, well, I could probably do some for you as well, and we could do the bottling. So I just need a little help in that regard because I don't know everything, but I would love to have one in my lineup, I can tell you, because I love to drink it.
So with such a broad selection of wines, how do you approach food and wine pairing? Are you looking for specific things to pair? Is it about style, or do you follow the rules, white wine and fish, red wine and meat? I mean, how do you look at it? Because you obviously have a huge selection of wines to choose from. What will make you choose one thing or another?
I have a huge selection is because it makes those food and wine pairings easier. So if I know what the chef's doing, then I can try and pick a wine that's going to pair well with their food. I did a dinner up in Coeur d'Alene a year or so ago at a French restaurant called Fleur de Lis. And the dessert course was a passion fruit sorbet, and they paired it with a Grenache rosé. It was absolutely stunning. So after a big meal, you're full and you don't really want something heavy. The sorbet was light and crisp, and then the wine has almost like a passion fruit note in the nose. And so it was to have a dry wine for dessert. It's kind of, not what you would expect, but it was fantastic. It was nice. And so
no rules.
I don't really have any rules. I mean, I did a dinner with a chef recently, and he wanted to do a red and a white. And one of the courses was a goat cheese ricotta with some lemon. And I'm like, that is a dead ringer for Sauv Blanc. But he wanted to do something else. So we said, well, let's bring in the Grenache. Well, when all was said and done, as we're sitting there eating the meal, the Grenache was way better than the Sauv Blanc. So what you think is going to happen doesn't always happen. So, I mean, when I look at a menu, I kind of brainstorm what I think is going to happen. But, I like to be surprised, and often I am.
So just have fun and drink what you want.
Yeah, and he's he's always throwing curveballs. I call him like the Sandy Koufax of chefs because, he's like throwing out eggs and asparagus. I'm like, Bob, what am I supposed to do with that, I mean, so. But.
So you're a beer guy first, a wine guy second, or maybe a wine guy first now, but I'm sure you've consumed a lot of alcohol in that sense. So I'm curious if in all your years' experience, if you have any special hangover remedies.
I like just virgin Bloody Marys, something spicy, tomato juice. That seems to kind of, and a jacuzzi, I think that combination kind of works. And then maybe a beer, I don't know.
So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste one of the J. Scott wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
I think our wines are really about balance. I make them, every single wine, I want you to be able to consume it by itself. But I also want it to be able to pair it with food. But it's really important that you can sit down and drink an entire glass of wine and not have the acid bother your stomach or the tannin. And so that's really something that I strive for, is balance. And people come in here often and they tell me, I go to wineries all the time and I usually find one or two wines that I like. I like every wine here. And so I really feel like that's kind of a validation of what we're doing. And Eric and I work hard on getting balance and working on the blends. And sometimes it'll happen in 2 hours, and sometimes it happens in 2 weeks, and you're just like banging your head against the wall because you can't get the wine just right. And so it can be frustrating. But I think, when I want them to know that they're going to get balanced, aromatic wines that they can enjoy at a good price.
So if space aliens were to land on your property here in your urban tasting room right now, which of the wines would you want to present to them?
Ooh, that's tough. I'm a big fan of our Grenache. Not many people make Grenache on its own. And it's a big, full-bodied red, but it has soft tannins, so it's really easy to drink. A lot of times people make Grenache rosé because, it oxidizes and it doesn't hold a lot of color. This particular clone we have is inky and dark, and it's just delicious. And so I just like to get people to get out of their comfort zone. We make some Portuguese reds that we do make a port out of, but we make them in a dry Douro style red. Touriga Nacional and Tinta Cho and Tinta Barroca, wow. And they're delicious. And sometimes they go into blends, sometimes they bottle them on their own, but those are fun too. And people haven't tried those, so it's just fun to kind of blow their mind. And they're like, when they walk in here, they've come from Portland and they're just getting Pinot to death. This winery had 12 Pinots, this winery had 10 Pinots, and then we have Cab and we have Tinta and Grenache, and I have beer in the fridge if you want a beer. There's a brewery in the building right next door, so you can go out the back door and taste beer. So, and they love that, and so they're really excited to try something different.
Something different. So, you've been doing this for a little while. How many years have you had your winery?
We started doing this full time in 2013, but I was making my wines at other wineries along the way. So back in 2003, my wife and I said, hey, we want to make a little of our own wine. We were living in Monterrey County in California, and we bought some wine, and then ended up moving to Oregon in 2004, a year later. So I drove up to Oregon with 4 used barrels and 2 rusty barrel racks, and we made 100 cases of a blend, and after that, we just kind of started making more. I interviewed this lady here in town, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to make my own wine. Are you okay with me making some of my stuff here? I want to work for you for 10 years, and then I'm done. And it was almost exactly 10 years that I up and started my own thing. And now we have 8 or 9 clients that we make wines for, in addition to our stuff. So,
wow. Wow. So in your experience, you're sourcing fruit from a lot of different vineyards and from a lot of different regions. In your experience, I know you're hedging your bets because, weather can be troubling in certain places. Do you see a lot of variation from vintage to vintage, and do you see similarities happening as well, or do you see each year unique to itself?
Each year is really unique to itself, and for many years, especially in the Northwest, I would track heat summation units or growing degree days, the number of days where the temperature is over 50, and you can really glean a lot of information about what that vintage is going to do like. So looking at that, you kind of can head off some problems that you might see coming. I find September really a critical month in the Northwest. It can be make or break. If it starts raining September 1, you're done. Unless you had a really warm May, which we kind of had this last year, and then it dried out. So that's really the key. But you can definitely identify trends and remarkable similarities based on heat.
So are there any signs or omens that you look for that will help you determine what a vintage is going to be like?
It's really, they're all really unique. Looking at those growing degree numbers, you can kind of track good vintages that by having tasted the wine in barrel, what those are looking like. And so if we can get this number in August, and then this number in September, we're there. But if it doesn't, you can start thinking, what am I going to do to mitigate that in the event that it doesn't happen? So you can definitely see those things coming. And it's a lot about the weather. We look about the weather all the time. We're constantly checking it, and it changes. I had a grower this last year. I called her up because it looked like we were getting a 3-day monsoon. I said, Marie, you need to get your stuff together, pick your grapes. All of a sudden the weather changed. The weather completely left. I'm like, we don't need to pick. We can let it hang. She's like, I got to get it because I got growers or pickers, And so she picked it, and we still made some great wine. But you have to kind of look at it, in the short window and just keep checking it because it changes up here all the time.
So you're sitting here and Eric's sitting next to you, your assistant or co-winemaker. Do you guys have any good luck rituals or things that you do before or during or after harvest that's part of a tradition here?
Well, we always start with champagne, and we usually end with champagne, So, and we periodically have a day, and we just lock the front door, and we go out to the brewery, and we go have beer, and they make gourmet pizzas next door, and they're fantastic. And we'll just regroup, and we'll say, okay, what do we need to do? And then we'll come back, and we'll hit it again. So we try and have fun. It's just, it's a job, it's work, but we're just making wine, So I try not to be too serious about it. I try and be safe so nobody dies because winemakers die every year. It's kind of a high hazard, business. You got to be careful. Mm-hmm. But we just want to have fun,
And you're having fun.
We're having fun,
So you're working with a lot of different growers. How much time are you spending in the vineyards? How intimate are you with the vines that you're purchasing fruit from? Or are you really more familiar once you're getting the grapes into the winery?
No, we spend a lot of time. And one of the reasons I talked to Eric into coming up and working with us was to kind of help lighten that load because we do source fruit from so many places. We have our own lab here. And so we go out and we walk the vineyards, sample the grapes, bring them back, run analyses, taste the juice, look at the weather, and, make kind of decisions along those ways. So it's really important to get out and to know the growers. And I get them involved as well. I get them up here and taste the wine from what they're doing, and we talk about it and how can we make improvements in the future. I really work closely with them. I let them know the price points we're shooting for. If we're looking for a $40 Pinot, we need to keep our yields down, And if we're, making a $20 Pinot, you can hang them over fruit. Don't dump so much fruit on the ground because you need to make a living as well. And so it's about communicating with them and just making sure that we all win, you know?
Yeah. Well, speaking of communication, do you communicate with your grapes or with your wines? I mean, when you're walking through the vines, do you ever talk to them? Do you have that kind of intimate relationship with them, or are you a little more distant?
If it's a full moon, naked through the vineyard. No, there's no truth to that at all.
What about in the winery? Do you find that you talk to the juice? I mean, do you feel that there's anything, whether it's music you're playing or talking, that there's a connection that you have with the wine?
You know, it's funny because I worked for another winemaker in California, and he was a French-trained winemaker, and he always played classical music. And I don't know if it was because they thought it made the wine better or it made the cellar workers more paid attention, but he was really into synesthesia. And we had done some tastings, you know, of different pairings of music with wine, you know. So is that Chardonnay better with Mozart or Motley Crue? And you'd be surprised. It's sometimes it's better with Motley Crue, you know. And so it's a really fun thing. So we do play music. Eric has this thing called kitchen sink radio, as he puts it on. And I mean, the other day we had Beethoven going, and then I mean, it's just everything it's just all over the place. Jimi Hendrix, I mean, and you know, reggae. So I think
you've got confused wine.
We do. We have happy wine, you know. I mean, it's just, you know, cellar guys are happy, the wine's happy, you know.
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
At one point, I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to be a lawyer. I'd never thought about being a farmer. You know, I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm like, who wants to be a farmer? You know, that sounds terrible. You know, you're thinking Depression era and stuff. I love driving a tractor. And I managed vineyards up here for a number of years. I just had 2 teenage daughters, and I just didn't have time for it anymore. And the winery is growing, so I sold the tractor and bought a second forklift. And, you know, now I just make wine. But I don't know. I ended up getting a business degree because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And sold home loans, you know, mortgages, and was in finance for a little while. I wanted to be a contractor and do like real estate development. Never was able to do that. Couldn't find any jobs in San Diego in construction, and ended up taking after I tried commercial real estate, I ended up finding a sales job for a distributor. And I had this nice route on the coast from Del Mar to the Mexican border. And, you know, I'd get up early and do my route and then go surfing. And, you know, it was really great. And that's where I kind of fell in love with wine. You know, more so because we'd go to Napa and Sonoma and take trips and taste other wines. And funny thing is that I ended up becoming a winemaker, and then ended up moving to Monterrey and doing something and buying a house and fixing it and selling it and buying a house. And so I ended up like flipping houses, you know, making more money than I made as a winemaker, doing what I wanted to do in the first place that I couldn't do. So yeah.
It all works out in the end.
Life is weird. Yeah.
So when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
I love to sail. I love to golf. Travel is a biggie for me. And I've kind of got my kids to have the travel bug too. So now they like to get out and cruise. And my youngest daughter just got back from a couple weeks in Peru. And so yeah, it's those are kind of my things. I love riding bikes
And when you're planning a romantic evening for you and your wife, whether it's the kids are out of the house or, you know, you get that rare night, what sort of wines would you be opening to make that evening romantic?
Well, my wife's a Chard lover. She loves Rombauer. She likes big and oaky.
She likes the cougar juice.
She does. She does. Yep. So we open different wines because that's not my thing at all. So she gets what she wants, and I have some other stuff. She wouldn't care. She wouldn't be offended by it.
It's not her work.
I'm sorry, but after that, or that would just make it for the evening?
No, I mean, we always did, you know, even when we were dating, we would always go and, you know, we'd buy a glass of wine at the restaurant, but then we'd have different tastes. And so we'd bring multiple half bottles. And so, you know, I'd be trying one thing and she's trying another thing. And so we totally drink different wines. And it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think back at all the advice you've received over the years, whether it was personal or professional, is there one piece of advice that you've carried with you, and who gave it to you?
This is my grandmother, and I don't know if this was her advice or somebody else's. You know, she says if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. So find something that makes you happy, and the money comes later. You know, be really good at whatever you do. And so I try and tell that to my nephews and nieces. I'm like, if you like working on cars, you know, you can be a NASCAR pit crew. You can be, you know, whatever you want, and you make great money. And I mean, my first job out of high school, worked for this plumber, and it was in Pasadena, and this guy's uncle had passed away. So the aunt asked him to kind of come in and do it. Well, this guy was doing like lights and crew for Black and Blue and Motley Crue, and that was his day job. But he ended up doing this plumbing job. And so I actually love plumbing. It's working with your hands. It's one of the reasons I got into winemaking, because a hands-on component to it. There's a farming, there's chemistry, there's, the social, and it's just really it hits all the points that I really like. But I mean, plumbers make big money, I mean, and nobody's going into it anymore. They think, oh yeah, you got to get a college degree, and there's so many people that have college degrees now, but I mean, my plumber, I'm up to like $16,000 in plumbing in my tasting room. I mean, that guy is making big money, So do what you love, and like I said, the money comes later. And
I'm assuming you would share that same advice, with our listeners. Is there any other advice you would give?
Enjoy every single day. I mean, just because you never know when your number's up, And so, I mean, go see the doctor, but have that second piece of pie, I mean, it's okay. And spend time with your kids because they grow super fast. Mm-hmm. And, that was the one thing I loved about, working for myself, was that I really got to spend a lot of time with my kids. I mean, I took them to school every day for most of their teenage years, all their high school. I try and take them traveling, and I just have a really great relationship with them. My oldest is now a sophomore in college. She comes back and she's just matured into this delightful young adult. I mean, she's got a sense of humor. She's funny, but I mean, she's courteous. She comes in and cleans the kitchen without even saying. She's just, I mean, I couldn't be more proud. I mean, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So enjoy life.
So this next question, you're not allowed to say your daughter.
Okay.
Even though that's a pretty proud achievement. But I was going to say, what is your proudest achievement to date in your work? Because I know family will always, win over anything else. And you clearly have a reason to be very proud of your daughter.
Well, it's really the winery. So, I mean, we literally bootstrap this. Most people come to the wine profession, they've made their millions in pharmaceuticals and, they open up this fancy winery and blah, blah, blah. We started with 2 tons of fruit and grew it and made 100 cases, and then made 200 cases, and then made 400 cases and 800 cases. And, now I have 11 employees, and, I mean, we provide for them and they provide for their families as a result. And, we're making a lot of wine. I still get to do what I love to do. And I have a good group of people working, and it's just, I think it's so much work. Winery cash flow analyses are usually negative for the first 10 years. It's just such a hard thing to make it. It's like they liken it to a public utility. It takes like $1 in capital assets to generate $1 in revenue. And so you really, all this equipment, I mean, I use that thing like 2 months out of the year. That thing's $50,000, and so it's like, you're just, barrels are $1,000. I mean, it's just, everything adds up.
Yeah.
And so to be able to work for yourself, do what you love, and put your kids through college and pay the rent, put food on the table, and pay your employees to help you. I mean, that's just, there's nothing better. I mean, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you make beautiful wine.
Thank you.
Now, complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
A day without sunshine.
God, you don't even have to think about these
Pouring
things.
rain outside right now.
So now I want you to imagine a scenario. We're sitting here at a table. There are a couple of us surrounding this table. We've got some wine. Your wine's on the table in front of us. Imagine that at that empty seat, there's someone else sitting here, and the paparazzi are really intrigued because of this person sitting at the table. Who would you want that person to be drinking your wine?
I don't know, Clint Eastwood, or, somebody fun. I think that, that would just kind of enjoy the wine and enjoy having a good time and kind of let their hair down and not be too stuffy. I mean, we like to make great wines, but I don't want it to be, this is not a pretentious place. I mean, it's a very humble winery, and we feel that you don't need the giant event center to be able to make good wines. We put our money in good barrels and in good people and good grapes, and we just really try hard to knock it out. But I want to have something that has fun. I love a sense of humor. Comedian would be great. Saw Trevor Noah recently. He was absolutely hilarious. So he had this funny thing about hunting. He's like, hunting's not, you can't really say it's a sport if the other team doesn't know they're playing, I'm like, well, so true, I mean, he's just, some of the things that come out of the guy's head, I mean, it's just, he's a riot. But I need a good laugh, and so I think a comedian would be good.
Well, I'm here sipping your Grenache Rosé, which is quite beautiful, and I would love to drink this anytime. But if you were going to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you want to take with you as your last 3 wines?
I've been asked this question before, and at the time I was thinking like Latoche or something, I mean, like DRC, because, I mean, I love great Pinot. I mean, and it's kind of transcendent, but on a desert island, it could be hot. I might think Grenache Rosé or Sauvignon Blanc,
You get 3 wines.
Well, I'm a big Sauvignon Blanc. I love Sauvignon Blanc. I love the Grenache Rosé. And I think probably a nice Pinot. So, and I typically drink New Zealand savvies, but only because those seem to be readily out there. Although I've been finding some great Vouvrays lately. I mean, even in Eugene. I mean, there was at least half a dozen restaurants. In fact, we got some dry Chenin this last year because I found some. There's like none growing in the States, so we're going to do a little something on our own. So
Ooh.
Yeah.
A little Chenin?
Yeah.
Ooh. That's exciting.
Yeah. It's pretty racy.
So now we're going to play a little game.
Good.
Of those wines and some of the wines that we're sipping here, I want you to pair them with music and tell me, well, you were saying how you listen to different music and wine can taste differently. I'm not asking you necessarily how the wine's going to taste with something, but what it makes you feel or think, what you'd want to be listening to, or what kind of mood it would put you in. It could be a genre, a particular musician, a specific song. I don't know where your music interest lie, but you were saying Sauvignon Blanc. You were going to take one to your island, a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would like, some Bob Marley or something. I mean, I feel like sitting under a palm tree and warm weather and a nice, crispy, icy glass of wine. In fact, I make my whites to be consumed at refrigerator temperature. A lot of people say, oh, there's more aromatic, get warmer, and they probably are, but I like them just ice cold, and I kind of test them that way as I'm making them to make sure they're not going to be too acidic, because sometimes the acid becomes a little more pronounced, when they get cold. So,
what about this beautiful Grenache Rosé?
I'm feeling south of France. I'm feeling like just like on a beach, topless.
And the music playing? I mean, we're getting
music. Music. How about Spain and like flamenco guitar? I mean, that really kind of gets you going. And again, another kind of warm region with a cooler wine. We've had this guy that comes in here and plays, and he's got this wireless thing on his guitar, and he plays flamenco. He is awesome. I mean, he roams around the place, but the music just carries all through the place, and it's just, I love it. I mean, it makes me want to get out and shake it. So,
Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley.
Interesting. What would that be for music-wise? Well, true. And actually, that's...
Are you cheating and getting help?
I am. He's on it, though, because I often tell people that we make our Pinot in kind of a feminine style, because we make Petite Sirah and Cab and some of those more kind of bigger wines, and I want to keep it kind of delicate and pretty. So, I don't know, maybe like Nora Jones or something like that. I mean, kind of.
I like that. Okay. And lastly, your Grenache. You said that's a little more meatier, a little bigger sort of style Grenache.
That one, I don't know, maybe I'm kind of feeling like Italian or something, or like what is that, the
accordion?
Yeah, the accordion, kind of that. It kind of has this European kind of sound to it. I don't know.
Okay. I won't pressure you anymore. You've done a really good job.
That's tough, Karen.
So, of all the places in the world, what's at the top of your list to visit? What wine region is at the top of your list?
I have not done Bordeaux, but I really would like to do Australia and New Zealand. I have not done either of those. And now that our kids are just about out of the house, my second is getting ready to head out, I'd really like to do those regions. I know Eric's been down there. He worked in New Zealand a couple of harvests. He got to spend some time in Australia. So those are big ones on my list. I don't know. How about you? Yeah. What do you think? Spain's another one too.
Piedmont region of Italy.
Piedmont's good. I've been there.
Altadesia would be cool. I really like the grind.
Yeah.
Grind also.
Lake Como.
Too many places to visit.
Yeah.
Too many.
Just keep checking them out.
Well, while you're figuring out which of these places is next on your list, how can people come and visit you?
So currently, our urban winery is open Friday nights and Saturdays when we're not making wine, because we don't want to run you over with a forklift. But we're in the process of opening a second tasting room at the 5th Street Public Market, which is a really fantastic area of town. Lots of restaurants, a number of other small wineries in the area, a couple of cool kind of brew pub type things within walking distance. You can do a little kind of pub crawl. And get snacks at each place, and that one will be open 7 days a week. We're hoping to open in January of 2020, so within this month. We're really close. We've been at it for 6 months. It's going to be beautiful.
And we'll just remind people, you're in Eugene, Oregon, which is at the bottom of the Willamette Valley. You can fly into Portland and drive 2 hours, or you can just fly right into Eugene.
Eugene Airport is fantastic. It reminds me a lot of the Monterrey Airport. It's very small. We have over 1 million visitors a year using that airport now, and it's super easy. We've been using it a lot because, even if you have to go elsewhere, I flew to Spokane and Idaho recently, and it's super easy in and out. You can see, you park your car, you can see the security line. It's 50 feet away, and there's nobody there. You just walk right on in. It's worth it.
So fly into Eugene and come find J. Scott Cellars.
Yes.
And we can find you online and social media?
Absolutely.
At?
jscottcellars.com.
Fantastic. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today on Wine Soundtrack, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.